Everybody, and welcome to this week's HackerKast, where we cover all the current events in the application security industry. My name is Jeremiah Grossman. I am the founder of White Hat Security, and I'm here as always with Matt Hansen. I think that's your name, right?
Still to this day.
Still to this day. And Robert R. Snake Hansen out of Austin with his nice tri-screen backdrop, which I'm always jealous about. So let's get to it, guys. We're post RSA, lots of cool stuff happening there. So I think the HackerKast for that one will post, and all new stories for this week. And of course, what week wouldn't be? It wouldn't be an application security week unless we get to bash WordPress. So Matt, tell us about WordPress.
Why me? Why always me? It's the weekly WordPress HackerKast.
You're just lucky, Matt.
We need a graphic. Like, it's like, you know how news stations have the graphic for their reoccurring segments? We need like a this week in WordPress on the screen or something. All right, so this one is kind of cool because, well, there's two. And the first one is cool because it is actually in WordPress Core, which is rare these days. Mm-hmm. That WordPress Core had a persistent XSS 0Day in, what was it, comments? And so, yeah, I mean, we're not going to spend airtime on this, but if you want the technical details, I'll include it in the recap. And then, okay, so that was core. We need to bash on plugins now. Of course, another XSS bug, but this one is in tons and tons and tons of plugins because it was a recurring function that was just really poorly documented and just used everywhere.
Two functions, actually.
What was it?
It was two functions, actually, even worse.
Yeah, so tons of these things. I think a couple hundred, or let's see, a scan of the top 400 plugins. The official WordPress repository has over 37,000, and in the top 400, there was a few dozen in those top 400 were vulnerable. Top 400 plugins. So.
On the persistent cross-site scripting in the core one, so you posted the comments, and then basically if the admin reads it, you take over the whole system?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, and it's patched as of this morning, like an hour ago from when we're recording this.
So now it's a patch race now. Who can patch the fastest before Metasploit does?
Before it patches it for you.
This sounds like a talk that Robert and I are preparing of how fast adversaries are getting versus how fast you have to defend against them. So.
Yeah. Yep. All right, so that's WordPress. We get to bash on WordPress a little bit, probably every week. The next story here, which was pretty interesting. The headline reads, "Fake email regarding CEO resignation tanks the stock." So I don't exactly know how to pronounce the name of the bank, but it's Italy's second largest bank, Intesa Sanpaolo. So what has happened here, it was a hoax email purportedly from the CEO linking to a site that was a fake site, and right when the CEO resignation email was sent, the stock tanks. Like, there was a very big noticeable drop in the stock over a fake email. And it looks like, according to the chart, you have this tank where it tanked a significant percentage. It spiked immediately back up once everybody figured out that it was a hoax. So it's hard to tell if this is like an issue of actual traders trading on this or is a high-frequency glitch. But it looks like at the end of the day, that stock still finished down about 1%, which is kind of significant. Like, normally the stock doesn't receive that kind of volume.
That's right.
We saw this a lot with like fake Twitter, like accounts get hacked and news Twitter accounts get hacked, and
Associated Press was probably the most notable.
Yeah, the bomb at the White House, right? And the stock goes pew.
I wonder. To me, I hope we don't give anybody ideas, but maybe that's what we do here. What happens if we start seeing these kind of resignation or hoax emails, but they cross it with cross-site scripting to get it to actually be hosted on the real website to give it an aura of legitimacy? Like, we haven't really seen that yet, have we?
Not that. We've seen fake news stories be created before. one of the black hats I talked to was talking about creating a fake news story related to some like awful incident, and the problem actually rose when someone tried to get a hold of him for quotes.
So yeah, because content spoofing vulns are good for that, and those are plentiful. Cross-site scripting, plentiful. I mean, that could actually do some damage.
Absolutely.
The problem is we haven't even had to go that far yet. That's why it hasn't happened yet. The bad guys are lazy. They don't need to do that. They just pop a Twitter account and the same result happens.
Yeah.
And to that point, so speaking of pop Twitter accounts, it was Tesla's turn. So Tesla's website was redirected to Faced, and their Twitter account hacked. So Matt was looking into this one. So what's the story on this one?
Yeah, so this one was fun because we know a few people on the Tesla security teams who were like, "Hey, hard weekend," and they said not really because it wasn't them; it was their DNS provider. So yeah, kind of hard, but no real cleanup on their end. So yeah, what happened was, well, they're not releasing details on how, but their DNS provider was popped. So Tesla Motors website was teslamotors.com was redirected and it said hacked by Autism Squad. Tesla, you've been
Autism Squad?
Something. Yeah. Whatever. And it's like a big pink background, and that's Tesla Motors said some stuff, right? But the cool, right? So the interesting way that they compromised the Twitter account was after they redirected the DNS that allowed them to redirect password reset emails from Twitter to some email at teslamotors.com, which they had the DNS for. So the MX record would point to them, and they could get the password reset, and so on and so forth. So even just another selling point for two-factor auth on your company's social media accounts.
And frankly, they're really lucky. That's all that happened. I mean, that could have been so much worse. They could have left the DNS alone for the website and just had all the mail going through them, and all kinds of horrible stuff could have happened.
How long until someone would have realized that, right?
Yeah, I mean forever, right? No one would have ever noticed until they start doing something with it.
Yeah, I guess the only reason we found out is because they made themselves known. They redirected the site. They started spamming the Twitter accounts. I mean, if they didn't, it could have been much. They probably just thought like, oh my God, we did it. Let's see what we can do, and move on.
Yeah.
Yeah, they put some vulgar words and stuff on the website and put their names and said, check us out on Twitter. So they were doing this for the lulz, it seems like.
And Robert, this is this chain of trust was something you're talking about when Hillary Clinton had that third-party mail server that you're talking about. Like your website is dependent and has been forever on the services of others.
That's right. I mean, everything. Mail is dependent on some other company. Probably you're hosting it somewhere. DNS is hosted somewhere. That DNS provider is using some whois server. That whois server is somewhere else, and it just kind of keeps going and going. You can end up with hundreds of companies, not even including the actual physical stuff. I'm just talking about logically that your security is based on, and that's just terrifying, right? Any one of those things could get hacked.
So as defenders, what are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to think about this chain of reliance, in the ecosystem on web security? Okay, so do I have to select my registrar, that the ones where I get two-factor auth accounts are the one that's most secure? So what are we supposed to do here?
Yeah, I think that definitely is part of it, and I also think having a chain that is as short as possible is also good. It limits the amount of things that can happen. There's so many different providers that rely on other providers. If you can get as few as possible and just get the final guy who only controls himself and is only relying on himself, that's much, much better.
And then you look at things that make the top 10 web hacks this year, like that residential gateway router ownage, and that's why they were doing that research, because they looked at how the residential gateway system worked, and it was basically this house of cards on this one server, this auto configuration server, this ACS. Figured out a way to own that, and that's it. With one cookie, took over a residential gateway router, and half of the IPs in certain countries were vulnerable. And what do you do as a consumer, right? It's you got to wait for your ISP to upgrade the firmware on a router somewhere,
Yeah, it's a tough situation, I guess, in a lot of ways. Web security, it's all connected. Nobody can say it's somebody else's problem because, like, we really got to lean on our vendors and suppliers to do security because our security is dependent upon theirs.
Now, what I'd be curious is did Tesla get any money from their DNS provider for getting hacked? I mean, is there any sort of SLAs? I mean, it seems like that's sort of a next step, right? Shouldn't you have an SLA if you're relying on them for your business continuity?
It would be an interesting question, at least a way the registrars could differentiate from each other. I mean, if domain owners are really concerned about security and which one, then there's SLAs.
Yep.
All right, so we've beaten that one to death. This is a cool one because they're always proposing these little changes to the HTTP spec. So something about a new status code called legally restricted. So Robert, you caught this one. So what is it? Legally restricted? What is this?
Yeah, it's pretty bizarre, but kind of neat in the modern age, I guess, we're all living in. But anyway, there's a new status code called 451, no relation to 451 group, although I did make fun of Wendy for that. The status code basically says this particular page is blocked for some reason. Somebody has said that it violates DMCA, or it's illegal in this country, or whatever. And instead of just failing with like a 404 error or forbidden or something that doesn't, none of that really describes what's actually happening, because sometimes it's only geographically blocked. Instead, now they have a new status code, and that status code will be able to inform the browser. Browser will be able to do something smart about it, as opposed to just saying, I can't find it, it's not there. When you know it's there, maybe you were in one country and you can access it, you go across the border, you suddenly can't. Is it broken? No, it's just legally restricted.
So I bet might make for some cool VPN plugins. You see legally restricted, and then route through your VPN in some other country, and you're good to go.
That's exactly right. A lot of browsers to do really interesting things finally, so it's a cool feature.
Huh. Cool. So is that released in the spec? Do the web servers support it? Do the browsers support it?
It's a draft, so I don't suspect this will be hitting their browser any day soon. But yeah, it's definitely something people are considering, and frankly, I think it's actually a good idea, given our current situation with the legal system.
Yeah. So let's see here. Okay, so next story, last story, certainly not the least. This one made the round. So MS 15034, the buffer overflow in the Microsoft HTTP I believe it's .sys, right? Robert, so you were looking into this one. So it's kind of rare for Microsoft these days to have buffer overflows in such a core library. So what's going on here?
Yeah, it's got a lot of play. I think really the only thing we've actually seen it be able to do currently is to take down web servers, but usually that's the first step in exploitation. Once you see memory corruption that's actually taking something down, causing blue screen of death, it's usually one short hop to actual exploitation. But I created a little piece of JavaScript that you could throw up on other people's websites and get other people to attack that particular website. Or, the thing that's really scary and people keep forgetting is that you can do things like DNS rebinding and cause the JavaScript to actually run on other machines. So it doesn't have to be just that particular website with that JavaScript running on it. It could be any website as long as you control the DNS. So instead of it just being somewhere on the internet, it could also be where people never patch, which is internal to their network. So you could actually once we get to the point where this is no longer buffer overflow to cause denial of service, and it becomes a buffer overflow to cause command execution, suddenly a little piece of JavaScript can now take out and completely do command and control on your internal network. So it's pretty scary, actually. Make sure you patch.
So this combines a whole bunch of research we've been doing over the years, like with the browser intranet hacking, and also the thing that you and I did, but also Matt and I did, of course, the million browser botnet to inspire a whole bunch of users. So we've spent $50 on an ad network, load up your JavaScript, do a browser intranet hack, and start going to town. So I guess it's all possible out there.
Mm-hmm.
This week in Arsnake put something really dangerous on social media. I'll link to the tweet.
So it's one internally that we've been triaging and how do we check for it at White Hat. So one of the things is it was difficult to figure out how to test for it in a reliable, safe fashion without denial of servicing the server. So I think we've cracked it, and we're actually starting to scan now. So we'll see what the results are like. Should be pretty interesting.
Yeah, it should be.
All right, so that's it this week, guys. That's AppSec current events. So we'll see what this week brings us. Probably always going to be an interesting week. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. Please rate, please subscribe. We really appreciate it, and we have fun doing it. Thanks, guys.